Today I'm going to talk about 4 key lessons about sales career that I've learned in 2023 and my takeaways on those lessons. You are listening to the SDR Game podcast and help you speed up your sales career and build more pipeline. My name is Eric and I host this podcast to build the podcast I would love to have when I started my sales career as an SDR. I've been in tech sales since 2018, top performing SDR at 4 different companies and leading SDR teams for the past 2 years. In today's episode, this is me journaling about my lessons about 2023. Part 1, that's the episode of today, so we're going to talk about sales career. Part 2, prospecting, and Part 3, we're going to talk about leadership. So let's start with what's new on the podcast and what's coming for 2024. In 2024, I was focused a lot on interviews. I had a few solo episodes, so I'm going to change that a little bit. So we still have interviews. We're going to improve the format and improving the topics and the way we are going to run those interviews. Second thing, I'm going to have more Q&A sessions. And the last type of episode is solo episodes. So like this one, so it's me speaking about journaling basically about a specific topic, or episodes on one tip, for example, one playbook. So for example, I'm preparing how to prep and make 2024 the best year of your sales career. Super excited about that and can't wait to share that with you. Before we start the episode, actually, I want to read a few messages I received on LinkedIn in the past week or the past 2 weeks. First one is from Samuel Wesley. Eric, I love your podcast and newsletter. I'm a BDR at Databricks, loving the role, and I've been fortunate enough to exceed quota every month since I arrived. Another one is from Hamid Mohammad Difar. Dear Eric, I'm reaching out to say thank you for creating the SDR Game podcast. I've got to know it recently and I'm going through all the episodes. I find it really valuable, insightful. Keep up the good work. And then we have Vlad Tarasov. Eric, discover your podcast on YouTube a week ago. Watched 5 episodes. Thank you so much for doing it. Great speakers, plenty of impactful ideas. Every part is well structured and prepared. I like that you put the speaker into the spotlight. Another one from Can Darren Arp. Eric, love your podcast. Thanks for the great content. The one from Ken Darren Arp. Eric, love your podcast. Thanks for the content. Another one from Serena Mac. Hi, Eric, I'm a huge fan of your podcast and LinkedIn post. They have helped me a lot. Thank you so much for the 5 of you. So thanks to Seren, Ken, Vlad, Hamid, and Samir also. Thank you so much for your message. And so, in today's episode, we're going to talk about the 4 key lessons in 2023 about sales career. So, we're going to start with lesson 1, the complexity of the job market in 2023 and remote hiring. Lesson 2, skill development. Lesson 3, managing up. And lesson 4, problem identification. And actually, those lessons, they are really focused on, for me, the Pareto law. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Pareto law, but basically it's 20% of the things you do or you learn, for example, they are going to produce 80% of the results. So that's why I choose those 4 specifically, because I think those 4 lessons had a huge impact on me this year. Because obviously I could have a list of 20 lessons, and obviously some of them are more important than the others. Let's start with lesson 1, the complexity of the job market in 2023 and remote hiring. I think 2023 and 2022, it was a tough year for a lot of candidates. So I'm going to talk about me specifically. So I moved back to Mexico in 2023 and I was looking for a remote job before moving to Mexico. And something I learned about remote specifically is when you apply to a company who says they are looking for remote candidates, you need to understand that there is companies that hire worldwide candidates, and then you have companies who are hiring only on specific countries. So, for example, I had a lot of job openings focused on the US. The struggle I have with that was that most of the companies, they were not, if you're not based in the US, for example, they are not going to have a conversation with you. And I completely understand that. I'm not here to say, hey, that's not fair for candidates, but that's the way it is. But my lesson on that is when I was applying for a job at the end of 2022 and to find my role at Castor Doc that I started in January in 2023, I was so mad that I couldn't control that. So what I did is, instead of trying to convince the hiring manager, I stopped doing that. And I think that was a waste of time from my part to try convincing them. And I focused only on the companies that, for example, they were open to hire worldwide candidates instead of just focusing on the US, because I learned that basically the hiring manager or the recruiter are not going to make any exceptions, even though there are solutions like DL, Oyster, for example. There are tools that can help, solutions that can help the company hire outside of the US, for example, but that's the way it is. And I wasted so much energy and on something that I couldn't control. So here, my lesson for you or takeaway for you is, if you're in the same position, not working in the US, for example, don't waste your time on that. Focus on those companies who don't care about where you are located, because you are going to waste so much time or energy on convincing a company who doesn't want to be convinced about that. So I'm not saying that's the case for all the companies, but I would say 90% of those companies who are, for example, hiring remote in the US are not going to hire someone outside of the US. So that was the number one. Number two, about the job market in 2023, was, even for me, for example, when we are talking about applying to roles, for me, it was so much easier via referrals. What I mean by that is, for example, at CasterDoc and AgroApples, that's my current role, both conversations started with a referral. Obviously, I still need, to have the hiring process, interviews with the CEOs or co-founders, for example, on both companies. But the conversation started with referrals. So at CasterDoc, through a guest I had on my show in 2018 or 2019 with a guy who was working at Data IQ, he got me the referral with the CEO, COO and co-founder of CasterDoc. So I started my conversation with them via the referral. And then I got the same. That was from Amina at Chili Peppers. So I used to work with her on the SDR team. And she introduced me to the CEO of AgroApples, and then started the hiring process. Something I learned about this specifically is, because obviously on top of that, I was applying for roles. And even though, for example, I'm not like new into tech sales, the thing I had was, even though for me it was tough to get interviews, especially those who are applying in a cold way, I would say. So not knowing anyone in the company, for even though I was prospecting them, contacting them on LinkedIn, sending them email, calling them, it was tough. So what I did instead, it was focusing on, obviously, and I think that's the same in sales if you can think about that for sales, but why are you going to focus on those companies that they don't know you don't know anyone in the company, instead of, okay, so do I know someone in the company, or do I know someone who can introduce me to this company who is currently hiring? And the takeaway from this is, if you think about applying for a job, is, instead of going blind and focusing on those companies where you don't know anyone or someone who can introduce you to someone, focus on the referral, because it's going to make the process so much easier. And I've seen this in my job search last year, and I know that helped me focus on, obviously, the right companies, but also moving forward with those companies. Okay, so that was lesson 1. Now let's talk about lesson 2, skill development. And so this topic, actually, that's something I love so much, skill development, because since I've been in tech sales, skill development for me, it's so much important in my career, I would say. But my takeaway from 2023 is, I stopped reading or listening to every topic in the world, because when I started my career, actually, I was reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of podcasts without having any structure. And which is great. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but when you started, I think that's the best way, because you want to focus on learning, and that's what I did. But in 2023, I was more, I would say, aware of my learning and focusing on the things I should focus on. So what I mean by that is, instead of reading everything, is I started to map my skills, for example, for the role I'm working for. For example, so if I was at Casterdoc, my previous role, I was a founding BDR, so my main role was prospecting and getting pipeline. So here it was much easier. It's cold calling, cold emailing, sequences, for example, or learning about, I would say, business acumen, because, for example, business acumen, it's so much, it's so a big topic, but business acumen was really important for me at Casterdoc because I didn't know anything about the data industry. So I needed to learn about the data industry, for example. And doing that, for example, mapping your skills, that's the first step, obviously. Then you need to score your skills, I would say, whatever you want to do, but out of one or out of one. Out of five, one out of five or one out of 10. And what you want to do is to see where are your gaps. Because obviously, if you are too on cold calling, well, maybe that's cold calling you want to focus on. And after scoring your skills, is easier to say, okay, I should focus on this specific skill. And for example, if it's cold calling, well, instead of reading everything about prospecting or any topics that you want to learn about, well, you are going to look only for skills about cold calling. But then you can go deeper on cold calling. Is it about the hook about your cold call? Is it about, for example, the value prop or the way you're asking your questions, your tonality? Well, you can go deeper on this. Obviously, there is topics about this, and then you can focus on that. Because for me, doing this specifically, and actually, that's going to take, I'm going to introduce a little bit, but listen 3, talking about this, because for me, 2023, it was managing up, one of my skills that I need to improve. And actually, that's listen 3. But managing up, for example, is something I need to learn about, because I never managed up, basically, until Q4 with my new role at Agropolis. And what I did is, okay, I need to improve my managing up skill and what I can do about that. So I started to look for resources about that, finding podcast episode, and I bought a book actually, and for now it's the book I'm reading about managing up, so I can focus on that. But I learned about that. I need to improve on that because, one, it's a skill that I do have up on my map, and that's through my boss actually at Agropolis. She were talking about the expectations from my boss, and she wasn't talking about managing up specifically, but and then I started to understand, okay, maybe there is something I should focus on. So that's why I've been focusing a lot in 2023 is mapping my skills and where I should improve my skills. And just focusing on one topic at a time, it's so much easier because obviously you can focus on so many topics at the same time and taking notes about a lot of things. So my takeaway from this specifically, and for you, if you want to apply this, is do a list of the skills you need in your role. So if obviously you're an SDR, cold calling, cold emailing, for example, sequences, prospecting on LinkedIn, video prospecting, objection handling, and have a score on all of them. Talk about it with your boss, for example, or if you want to talk about that with me, if you want, go ahead, send me a message on LinkedIn, and then start looking for resources about those topics, and then go deep on this skill specifically, and then you can learn about this topic, and then you will see, obviously, for your skill improve. So that was lesson number 2, skill development. Yeah, maybe before we move on lesson 3, the last thing about skill development is also, yes, it's great to read or listen to podcasts, but the next thing also is to execute on this. So I know it sounds cliche, but it's great to read a lot, listen to a lot of podcasts, but the next step in skill development is to how are you going to implement that. So if we talk about cold calling, like I was saying earlier, is can you apply those things that you're going to learn in cold calling? Obviously, you can do that on your course, but the other thing is role play with your manager. That's another one, or role play with other colleagues where you can implement that. And let me know how it goes with that. Lesson 3, managing up. So we were talking about that earlier. So yeah, like I was saying, for me, managing up, that's a new skill that maybe I was not aware of, and yeah, started to focus on that in Q4. But managing up, basically, it's the way you manage your boss. For example, I'm working directly. My boss is she's a senior director of sales enablement. Her boss is the VP of sales, and then his boss is the CEO. So how I'm going to manage my relationships with them? Because obviously, if now I'm not into an SDR role anymore, I'm leading the team at the SDR team at Agropolis. But there is obviously how do you manage your team, but also how do you manage your bosses? And that's something I've never thought about, focusing on how to improve my relationship with my bosses. But Q4 was when I started to realize that, and I think it's so much important to think about that and improve this, because you want to manage the expectations and you want to understand how your boss operates. And for me, in my previous role, scenario was always more focused on blaming my boss, or for example, that I had a boss that was not present. This boss was maybe not focusing on my coaching or training, and I had other bosses like that. And I think managing up is stop blaming your boss, but start thinking about how you can improve your relationship with your boss. Obviously, I'm not saying that if you have a shitty boss where there is not a lot of solution on that, expect and moving to another team or leaving the company. But if you have a boss who is okay, how do you manage this boss? But obviously, if you have a great boss, well, that's great, because there is so many people who say, yeah, you should choose with the boss you want to work for. Yes, I agree with that, but also sometimes you don't choose, because, for example, when I joined Agropolis, I was normally going to work with the CMO at the company, and the CMO left. And so I wasn't expected to work directly with the sales team, the VP of sales or the senior director of sales enablement. So, well, I couldn't control that. But I joined Agropolis, and I was more also aligned with the company, on top of who I'm going to work for, work with as a boss. So something I was thinking about that specifically before was, here my boss need to improve. And I think that was a wrong idea, because one is you can control that. So it's how you can think about you improving your relationship with your boss and what you can do differently, understanding your boss, and you need to adapt to your boss and not the other way around. And actually, so I was talking about the book earlier. I already started to talk about this book in a newsletter a few weeks ago. So the book is Managing Up by Mary Abaje. So I received the book like a month ago, something like that, and I started to read it. And for me, it was so that I just read the chapter 1, and it was so interesting. So I'm going to read like a few quotes so you can see that I've highlighted. So first one is, establishing strong, productive working relationship is the single most effective way to accelerate success in any org. Long story short, your relationship with your boss can hurt or help you. It's up to you. Why you can't change who your boss are, you can change how you interact with them, and that's where managing up comes in. Do not fall into the trap, my boss should be, or my boss ought to. A bad or difficult boss is not an excuse for lack of effort on your part. And when I read those specific parts of the book, I say, wow, okay. And I was seeing myself earlier, a year or 3 or 5 years ago, focusing on, hey, my boss should do this, my boss should do that, and it's on you. Unfortunately, if you think about that, you need to blame your boss to talk about your success in your own. Unfortunately, that's not the case. That's on you. And even if you are just an SDR, or like me, an SDR leader now, it will always be the case. You are the owner of your success, and you need to learn how to manage your boss, how you need to interact with your boss, what's the expectations, because all the bosses that you are going to offer, they will be different. Some of them are really interested into your growth as a person, but also some people that are more interested about the results. So my takeaway on this is you need to change your mindset about that you need to own this relationship and not your boss. So obviously I'm thinking I'm going to share more tips from this book, tips or lessons from this book. But that was one of also my key lessons from 2023 about managing up, because I don't think that's just related to SDR leadership, but also as an SDR, trying to understand your boss. So that was lesson 3. Okay, so now lesson 4, problem identification and solution offering. So here specifically, that's something I think I wanted to share and talk about a few things is if you want to grow in your career is you need to be really good at seeing patterns or maybe problems that no one else is seeing. And that's the first step because yes, that's great to see the problem, but the next step is what's happening with this problem and what is it causing and what's, for example, costing at the company. And step number 3 on that is what's the solution? Because recently, I have an SDR on my team that I was talking with. He was sharing me some problems we had on the team. And what I think he was really good at, he was offering me solution. What I mean by that is it's great to spot problems, but you need to also, if you spot those problems, you should show what's causing, what's the consequences of this problem, and then what's the solution. And my SDR, so this SDR is continuing on my team, I don't remember exactly what was the problem, but I remember we were talking about this, that he was talking about struggling with something, and that was a problem that I could fix, obviously, but what was interesting with Quentin on this problem specifically is he offered me the solution. And really, how do you say that? Say, hey, thank you for offering a solution, because it's great when you come to your boss and you say, hey, we have a problem, and that's it. What's happening is generally your boss, they are focusing on a lot of different topics. So it means that if you come to with another problem, well, it's going to add another problem to the list and to the list. So it's going to add a lot of, brain energy to think about a solution for this. And I think here we are talking about Quentin as an SDR, and I think obviously you can do that as an SDR leadership. And something, if you want to think about that differently, is if you spot a problem as an SDR or as an SDR leader, and talk about it with your boss is, 1, what's the problem? That's obviously step number 1. But step number 2 is what's the cost of it? Because obviously not all the problems important to solve, because obviously if it's a problem that on my team is, if an SDR can log to Salesforce, for example, or CRM, obviously that's a problem because it can work and it can do what it's supposed to do. But if it's like something really minor that obviously doesn't make sense to fix, well, that's something you want to understand. But if it's a problem causing, I don't know, $20,000, for example, yes, that's something, obviously, that's an important problem that we need to fix. And so the last step is obviously, how do you solve that? Because what's the solution? What we can do about that? Can we do that internally? Do we have the right people to solve this problem? That's one part of the problem, one part of the solution. And then if we don't have the solution internally, what we can do externally? Do we need to bring a tool? Do we need to bring, I don't know, a consultant, or depending on the problem you're looking for? So for me, for example, one problem that I can share that we are fixing right now in January is the demo request process. Because for me, joining AgroApples in Q4, AgroApples for me it's the first company where I'm working with the inbound SDR team, and we have like almost 200 demo requests per month. But our process, I think, can be optimized, but there is so many things that you can do. But obviously, if you quantify the problem about the demo request process, is we are losing deals. For example, some deals we are not going back in quick enough to our prospects, so our prospects are buying a competitor solution. So obviously, we can quantify that we are losing money. It's costing us new logos, but also revenue. And obviously, if we already are fixing the solution, but the problem was, I saw the problem, I started to quantify it, talk about it with our leadership team, and now in January we're finally fixing it. So obviously, it's going to help us improve this process and fix it. So yeah, that's it for today's episode. So that was my 4 key lessons about sales career, and how you can obviously find my takeaway on those and how you can use that in your role. So thanks for listening, and yeah, let me know what you think about this. So if you're on YouTube, comment under the video. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, feel free to contact me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, and yeah, would love to get your feedback about this episode. I see you on the next one.